For 20 years, a single German signature could block billions in South Korean tank exports. Now that monopoly is shattered, South Korea's new DV27K engine just bypassed Berlin's control, unlocking markets, rewriting alliances, and putting real power back in Seoul's hands. How did they break free after decades on the export leash? MTU's EMB-873 engine set the gold standard for tank propulsion across NATO. With 1,500 horsepower, a V12 diesel block, and proven reliability from the Arctic to the desert, it powered thousands of Leopard 2 tanks and became the benchmark for heavy armor worldwide. But its prestige carried a hidden cost. Every unit left the factory under a strict legal leash. German law classified these engines as dual-use military goods, meaning each one was tracked not just by the company, but by the German government's export authority, BAFA. Any country wanting a K2 Black Panther with an MTU engine faced a maze of paperwork. The process began with a re-export consent clause buried in every contract. South Korea's manufacturers needed written approval from both MTU and BAFA before a single tank could be shipped abroad. That meant submitting technical data, end-user certificates, and a full risk assessment for every buyer. BAFA then reviewed the application, consulting the Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry for sensitive destinations. If the political climate changed, or if the destination raised concerns about regional stability or human rights, BAFA could delay or deny approval, sometimes for months, sometimes indefinitely. No matter how advanced South Korea's tank was, a single German signature could stop a billion-dollar deal. This was not just a technical dependency, it was a legal and diplomatic lock enforced through a web of contracts and export laws. For 20 years, the path from Seoul's assembly lines to the world's battlefields ran straight through Berlin's approval chain. In 2016, Turkey's Altay tank project reached a standstill. The prototype, built around German MTU engines and RENK transmissions, suddenly faced an insurmountable obstacle because Berlin imposed an export embargo. German authorities, citing concerns over Turkey's military actions in Syria, refused to approve further engine deliveries. Production lines in Ankara fell silent. The Altay, once hailed as a symbol of Turkish defense independence, became a cautionary tale of external dependency. For nearly 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, not a single tank rolled off the line. Contracts worth billions hung in limbo. Engineers, suppliers, and defense officials waited, powerless to move forward without German consent. The impact rippled far beyond missed deadlines. Turkish armored brigades, counting on the Altay to modernize their forces, were forced to delay their plans. Domestic industry lost momentum. Political frustration grew as every workaround, alternative suppliers, and diplomatic appeals ran into the same wall: Germany's legal veto. The embargo exposed a vulnerability that no amount of local assembly could fix. Without control over the engine, the entire program was hostage to foreign policy decisions made thousands of kilometers away. In the defense world, this was more than a technical setback. It was a blunt reminder that sovereignty depends not just on what a country can build, but on what it can deliver, on its own terms. Designing a tank engine isn't just about hitting a number on a test stand. Korean engineers learned that the hard way. Early DV27K prototypes delivered the promised 1,500 horsepower but could not hold it. Under continuous load, output sagged, sometimes within hours. In the field, that meant a tank could lose speed or even stall during the kind of drawn-out maneuvers that decide real battles. Then came the shock tests. Every time the K2's main gun fired, the recoil sent a violent jolt through the engine mounts and block. German engines had decades of experience with these forces. Korean teams, starting from scratch, watched mounts crack and components loosen under repeated fire. Fixing it required new alloys, reinforced brackets, and months of trial and error. Temperature extremes brought their own failures. In desert heat, early engines overheated, sensors triggered emergency shutdowns, and lubricants broke down. Arctic simulations exposed cold start problems. Batteries drained, fuel lines froze, and blocks seized. Engineers pored over test logs, adjusting cooling systems, fuel injection timing, and even the composition of engine oil. The transmission proved even tougher. The first domestic transmission, the EST-15K, failed to survive the required 320-hour endurance run. Gear teeth sheared off, seals leaked, and control units glitched under vibration. With no time to wait, Korea shipped early K2 tanks with a hybrid solution, their own engine but still relying on German Renk transmissions. Only after years of redesign did the domestic power pack finally pass reliability trials. These setbacks stretched the program to nearly 2 decades and forced a budget approaching 100 billion won. But each failure became a blueprint for the next fix, and every logged defect shaped the engine that would finally break the monopoly. On September 19, 2024, South Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration gave its final approval. The DV27K engine and EST-15K transmission passed the last round of qualification tests, clearing the way for full-scale production and export. For the engineers at HD Hyundai and SNT Dynamics, this was the moment that 20 years of trial, error, and redesign had aimed for. Certification was not handed out on promises or projections. It came only after the power pack endured 9,200 kilometers of simulated battlefield driving and 306 hours of non-stop operation without a single critical failure. Every hour pushed the engine through extremes, desert heat, sub-zero cold, and the violent shock of gun recoil. Early prototypes had faltered in these same tests, but the final version delivered full power with no degradation. Cooling systems were overhauled, engine mounts were reinforced, and the electronic control unit was recalibrated to keep output steady, even as the temperature swung from blazing to freezing. The transmission, once a chronic weak link, now shifted cleanly under full load, meeting the required acceleration and reliability benchmarks. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration's approval meant more than just a technical green light. It ended the last threat of dependency on foreign suppliers. For the first time, South Korea could build and export the K2 Black Panther on its own authority without waiting for outside signatures. The news traveled fast through the defense industry, but for the teams who logged every kilometer and analyzed every data point, the sense of arrival was unmistakable. The monopoly was broken. Sovereignty at last was certified. Poland's Ministry of Defense signed for 116 DV27K engines as part of its second K2 Black Panther batch, a deal embedded in a $6.5 billion contract covering 1,000 tanks. For the first time, these engines will ship directly from Korea. No German signatures, no foreign approval. The agreement goes beyond a simple purchase. It lays out a roadmap for technology transfer, with most of Poland's K2 fleet to be assembled at home starting in 2026. That means Polish workers, Polish factories, and Korean engines, all without a single document routed through Berlin. The contract validates years of Korean engineering, and it also sets a precedent. A NATO frontline state can now field and build main battle tanks without negotiating export consent from a third country. For HD Hyundai, this order is more than a commercial win. It is proof that the DV27K is ready for global deployment and that Korean industry can deliver on its own authority, from assembly line to battlefield. South Korea's engine independence has sent ripples through the global defense market. In 2025, the country's arms exports soared to $28.45 billion, an 81.6% jump from the previous year. The order backlog now surpasses 100 trillion won, and new buyers are lining up from South America to the Middle East. Turkey's Altay tank, once frozen by German export bans, is back in production using Korean engines. For countries long frustrated by foreign vetoes, the appeal is clear: buy a modern tank, get assured delivery, and skip the diplomatic hurdles. But this new leverage brings fresh questions. Korea now holds the keys to a growing share of the armored vehicle market, but must also manage the risks that come with it. The next frontier, jet engines for fighters, remains out of reach, with the KF-21 still tied to American suppliers. As export controls shift from Berlin to Seoul, policymakers face a new challenge: how to balance growth, alliances, and the responsibilities of a major arms exporter. Today, South Korea no longer asks permission to power its own tanks. As defense exports surge, up 81.6% in just 1 year, industrial sovereignty reshapes alliances, supply chains, and global leverage. The global arms market just gained a new gatekeeper. The question now is, Who controls the next frontier?